I think we're okay.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine. Okay, so it says it's preparing to live stream. And so I think that pretty much means it is done. So I think we are live right now. Um, Good morning. Thank you so much for being with me today. Today I am here on my Facebook Live with Caroline Pack, who is a certified divorce financial professional. Can you first welcome?
Thank you, Elise. Thank you for the honor of being here with you and to be able to share the platform with you. It really is an honor and a privilege.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. I can't wait to dig in to what you do. I'm always fascinated by your work and how it helps the clients we serve.
Yeah.
Tell us about what you do exactly.
So I am the founder of Foundations Divorce Solutions, and I am a mediator and a CDFA, which is a certified divorce financial analyst. My background is in finance. I've been in finance for over 17 years, starting off at the local branches and then growing into wealth management groups. So I've worked with families who have a lot of money, the ultra high net worth clients. So I've worked the spectrum in terms of finance, from working with clients' very first checking accounts and savings accounts as a teenager, all the way to working through generational planning.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's been a lot of beautiful years, and watching families just go through different transitions.
Yeah. Oh, well, and talk about how what you do plays into divorce. When people are thinking about divorce, how does what you do now help with that?
So I will share with you how I got into the divorce world. You know, as when I work face to face with clients, I live life with them, right? It's not just that they come in to open a checking account.
Right.
It's not just to say, I want to invest money. Literally, I get to sit with my clients and know their families, know their stories. Sometimes they go through divorce while we are together. You know, they're thinking about it. They talk things over with me. Sometimes we attain clients post-divorce. Mm-hmm. And the catalyst to me focusing on working with people going through divorce is because one specific client who came post-divorce, she didn't have any money. Clearly, you know, she went through the litigation process. She had a contentious divorce. And when she came to our practice, she didn't have the cash flow. She was used to living a certain lifestyle, and nobody ever went over her budget with her. Nobody ever said, hey, if you keep living as you did prior to divorce, these are some of the pitfalls.
Right.
You know, when you're married, you are living off of either one or two incomes and one household. Right. Once you're divorced, it's two households. So the expenses double, right? That family plan, you know, for the telephone, the internet, the insurance policies, all of those things have to be separate now. So I don't think anybody ever sat with her. So what was happening was she was calling every month to ask for money out of her retirement account, out of the traditional retirement account. First downfall is taking money out when you're under 59 and a half, you are taxed twice. Right. So she's getting taxed, not putting any money aside for taxes because she needed all the cash. Second, she wasn't going to be able to put that money back within 60 days, nor in the near future.
Right.
And then thirdly, again, she was in her early 40s. The compounding of that investment from her early 40s until retirement just got lost.
Right.
And I can clearly see it, but it's hard to speak into somebody's life post-divorce. Mm-hmm. And I felt that I had a responsibility to be able to share my knowledge to be able to say, hey, can we look at where we're at currently? How can I help you so that when you do finalize your divorce, we're in a situation where you're not wondering how you're going to keep the roof over your head?
Right.
Like, heartbreak moment, but it doesn't have to be, right? It just
Yeah.
takes a little bit of forethought, a little bit of planning. But truly, she is the reason why I decided to go into the divorce world and really focus on helping families transition from one chapter, one portion of the journey of their lives to a different chapter. And from there, really work through some of the details, some of the financial details they might have missed.
That's amazing. What an amazing story. Have you ever told her that she has been the impetus of what you're doing now?
Multiple times. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm
It's
so
hard,
sorry for her,
right?
but yeah, but I mean, it happens. And obviously, I'm not a financial person. I'm a
Yeah.
lawyer. But there are so many times when we have clients talking to us about things, and they probably seem simple to you, but things like just basic, do I keep my house? And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a major decision. And you need to really look at this in light of your entire financial picture. And
Yes.
so many people will be like, oh no, well, my children, I must keep my house. And I'm like, oh no, you're not making this decision based on your children's bedrooms and whether they want to move. Like,
Yeah.
you need to look at this analytically and financially and really determine what is right for you long term, because your children are going to be fine in a new bedroom, but they're not going to be fine if you can't put food on the table.
And just showing up with the stress of finances.
Right.
We already know that finance is probably one of the top reasons why couples get divorced.
Yep.
Now, why bring in new financial stress? And the kids all know,
oh yeah,
we can't stay in the house, but we're trying so hard. And mom's stressed again, and dad's stressed again. Like, what's better about this scenario versus
right.
when they were married and they were stressed together, right?
I mean, it's so true.
Yeah.
It is so true. Well, tell us a little bit about, so do you work in the collaborative area of family law? Do you work in the litigated area of family law? Both? I mean, like, how would I refer cases to you? I mean, tell us a bit about all of those things.
So my sweet spot is working with amicable couples who are going through amicable divorce, who want to stay out of trial.
Okay.
So if I can mediate for them, great. Sometimes it's not the right fit. It has to be a specific fit where I can be the financial neutral, work with them through the details of their finances. I work with their budget quite extensively. I want to make sure that from year 1 to 10, that the cash flow. And how do we make the cash flow?
Right.
What are the tax consequences? Looking at all those details, right?
Yeah.
If they make too much income, will they be over a certain tax bracket versus under a certain tax bracket? And what are some of the tweaks that we can make in preparation for some of the things that could come up potentially?
Right.
So sweet spot is mediating and being the financial neutral. The next one would be collaborative, where I'm still the financial neutral, but we have the two attorneys representing the clients. And we as a team really want the clients to be able to make agreements together without going to court. I will also do litigation support in the sense of advocating for one spouse, whether it's that I am hired directly by the spouse or through their attorney's office, to look at the finances specifically for the one spouse and how to advocate for them.
Right.
But those are about the general situations of the type of work, the scope of work that I will do.
Okay, great. That is awesome to know. And I really want my listeners to know about what you do, because so many people don't know about financial neutrals. And I find in doing consults with clients, I mean, oftentimes people come to us and they don't need us. What they really need is a you know, they need somebody who's going to help them work with their spouse and look at that budget and really dig in to what is going on. What are they doing? I mean, I feel like I have many conversations about people living beyond their means, and they really aren't thrilled to listen to me talk to them about
It's
that.
difficult. It's such a difficult conversation,
It
right?
is, but
Yeah.
boy, is it needed. I'm like, you know, there's times that I'm like, these, you just can't afford X, Y, or Z. So we need to figure out which of X, Y, and Z we're nixing. And
Right.
you know, and I'm all about creative solutions too.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, I was curious if it comes up with your work, is the issue of children and going off to college and financial aid and when to apply and how to apply and whether their divorce is going to impact that and what that's going to look like.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Divorce, of course, does impact the financial aid, and with the rules for financial aid changing,
Mm-hmm.
even that, right? We have to take the new rules into consideration. Who's
Right.
going to have the majority of the custody? And I mean, it's literally like 50 days plus one, right?
Exactly.
So, how do we make sure that we can align our clients so that their children have the best case scenario for grants and, scholarships versus, okay, they were going to stay with the higher earning, parent, and now they don't qualify. They're just right above the qualification line.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those conversations I find, I mean, people often are like, they're like, Elise, that can't be right. I'm like, you really do need to think about this.
It's really the long term.
It
It's the
is.
short term, the actually the immediate, the short term, and the long term.
Right.
You got to look at the whole picture. And
Absolutely.
especially for the non-CFO spouse, to be able to say, hey, can I work with you on this? It's scary. I understand that. It is scary. This is all numbers can be very overwhelming. Going through divorce is already traumatic.
Yep.
So, how can I, as a professional, walk through with my clients based on their need and meet them with kindness and compassion, but
Right.
also with a little bit of, hey, let's scoot forward. We can do this. Let's take one step forward. From there, let's make sure you're comfortable. Let's take the next step forward. Because working in collaborative divorce, we don't force our clients to make all their agreements right there in one sitting.
No way.
You wait until they are ready. Sometimes you set the next meeting and you recognize that, one spouse, they can't do it. Like they
Right.
are frozen. Their reptilian brain has kicked in and they are now frozen. So it's like, how do we work with them to unfreeze so that we can take the very next step
Right.
and take the overwhelm away?
I mean, it is such an important process, what you do, helping people really look at their finances, you know, realistically and strategically. And yet it is such, people just want to, you know, do their ostrich thing and put their
Yeah.
head in the sand.
It's easier that way
It,
for the
it,
short term.
yeah, for the very short term.
Yeah. And then life still happens, right? The
Right.
bills still need to get paid. And
Right.
we need to prioritize how to pay the bills, how to keep the roof, keep food on the table. And then from there, how do we do with the extras? Where do we allocate the money?
Right.
Especially if it's a set, whether it's because of divorce, you get a set amount every month, or you retire and you get a set amount every month. We still need to look at the finances to make sure that you're okay, that this money will last for years to come, decades to come, possibly generations.
Yeah. do you talk to your clients, especially that spouse that might have been the stay-at-home mom or somebody who was not really utilizing their own education and their own career path fully? They might have been at home with their children or various other things. Do you talk to them about getting back in the workforce? Do you ever, talk about vocational rehabilitation, or, how can they really empower themselves to start bringing in money into their own home in the future?
Yes and yes. Anybody who meets me will know I am always about, let's make sure we walk into the fullness of our calling.
Right.
And sometimes when our identity has been set in a certain manner, it's hard to break and
Right.
see the potential of truly, where else am I supposed to be? Where
Right.
else am I supposed to go? How else am I supposed to grow?
Right.
And I will do my best to speak into my clients' lives, but sometimes I'm not the right person, right?
Mhm.
So I have other professionals I will bring alongside me to help our clients, because whether it is having to walk into a new career,
Right.
whether it is just a mind frame that needs to be shifted from one identity to the potential of a new identity, um, as a financial neutral, my hands are semi-tied.
Right.
If I'm an advocate, it's a totally different story. But
Right.
as a financial neutral, I really need to represent both parties as best as I can.
Mhm.
Now, I haven't had one spouse complain to me, saying that, oh, you're helping my spouse too much in trying to get them on their feet, especially when we're talking about child support and, spousal maintenance.
Totally.
But it really is making sure we have that team to help them in
Right.
every step of the manner. I mean, the collaborative practice, it's huge, right? This is where we get to walk with them and say, hey, we as the core team, we're limited, but we have some affiliate professionals who come in and work with you, whether it is a, career coach to help them do some assessments and say, okay, what's the next step that we can take? And
Right.
from there, how can we continue to build each step?
And you hit the nail on the head, though, when you talk about how somebody's identity gets really wrapped into what they might be doing, and they might not see what that next step even can look like. And so I think having those conversations to help people really broaden their mind about what is possible and what possibilities are out there. I mean, because sometimes we're talking to people who might have been out of the workforce for 2 decades,
Exactly.
plus.
Yeah,
And I mean, the world is very different than it was 20 years ago,
completely. I
you
mean,
know?
we work with our own professionals, and we know, in the finance industry, I work with a lot of advisors who built their business and their practice 20, 30 years ago.
Totally.
Well, what worked back then, it's not working today. You
Right.
can't build the same practice as you did 20 or 30 years today. We're on Facebook Live today. We
Exactly.
didn't have that 20 or 30 years ago.
Exactly. Well,
There's
just email alone. I mean, you think of people who worked in professional lives, 20 years ago. I mean, email was definitely not what it is now.
the iPhone, smartphones. Gosh, when cellular phones first came out, that big clunker that nobody could afford except for the super wealthy, to the Palm Pilots. And now it's a phone and a Palm Pilot put together, and we can't live without it.
Exactly.
Right. So, how do we help our clients shift from, okay, this is the way it was, completely understandable. How can we take one step forward, just
Right.
one tiny step forward? And what's the next step that we can take? Um,
It's, I mean, it speaks to me so much when you think about and hear you talk about meeting clients where they are and really standing next to them side by side and helping them take those steps. I mean, it just makes me remember I had a client one time going through a collaborative process, and she was really struggling with certain, parts of things. And one day we were supposed to meet, and she was going to come to my office, but it was too much for her. She really just
Mhm.
could not get out of bed, get her clothes on, get to the office kind of thing. And so I told her, I was like, there's no reason you have to come to my office. Like, obviously I could come to you just as easy. And so, and I mean, obviously I didn't normally do house calls, but
Yeah.
it just made me realize like she really needed that. And so, I mean, I picked up Starbucks on the way, showed up at her house, sat at her kitchen table while she was in her PJs, and we were able to meet and move forward and take that next step.
Yeah.
And something as simple as that, I mean, that was the simplest little thing that I could do, but it made a massive difference in
Huge.
her ability to just get through that day and that decision, whatever it was,
Yeah. In my mediations, I remind my clients that they are going through a divorce, which is a traumatic event.
Right.
Whether it was their choice to divorce or not, it's still traumatic. We are still going through the grieving processes, and the emotions will well up again,
Oh, yeah.
even if you chose the divorce, right? Um, some of my clients, I tell them that, my business name is Foundations Divorce Solutions. And part of how I work with my clients is they had built a foundation, a marriage for so many years. And in this process that we're meeting together, we are taking one brick at a time
Right.
and taking it apart. But we are now building new foundations for their new lives and making sure that whether it's going through the finances and that making sure that the budgets work, it's part of the foundation building. We are putting the posts on the corners of each home to make sure that whatever new life we're trying to help them build, it's solid. Without the right foundation, they're going to have to undo it and redo it. And
Right.
and that alone is like double trauma. So what can I do to help my clients make sure that as we're undoing the foundational, we're basically tearing down the home that they built and all
Right.
the memories. How do I, with care and kindness, meet my clients as they're grieving the process of every single item being undone, right? And then from there, give them enough hope to start building back something that they are both happy with. It might not be the ideal because let's be
Right.
honest, if they're going from one income, one household to one income, two household, it's going to be tough for a while.
Absolutely.
But how do we shift that mindset to the new mindset and help them know that it will get better, that things will be newer, things will be different, but that they will be okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and really being able to show them on paper with numbers, at least for
Yeah.
me, is very reassuring when you can see right in front of you
Yeah.
how it works, but how it doesn't work too.
Yeah.
So you can see what tweaks need to be made to make
Right.
it work. I mean, and I know I'm probably a very logical type, so I love that. And I think that it is just really helpful for people to understand. And you make such a good point when you bring it up about one household, one income, two households, maybe still just one income. It is going to be tough in having those conversations around, because sometimes I think people, I don't know where they think the money is coming from. It's like it is not
In the
growing
bank.
in your backyard.
Yeah.
And despite the long flowering season here in
Yeah.
Washington, like it's just not growing. And
Yeah.
people, they're like, well, that's what we always did. And I'm like, well, now you have two entire households.
Two homes to support,
I
like
mean,
physical homes and literal home, or
exactly.
metaphorical homes, right?
And
Um,
all the expenses that are associated with two homes. And having the conversations about, when you talk about people's lifestyles,
yeah.
and it's like, maybe you don't need a 6-bedroom home, with 5,000 square feet. And maybe, your children who are going to college in 2 years would be fine in a 3-bedroom home. And, just having all those conversations about what changes and what tweaks can we make that will actually make your life less stressful moving forward. I mean, I always talk to people, I'm like, do you really want to vacuum all that? Like, let's really think about what we're doing.
Well, let's be real. If there was a 6-bedroom home, most likely there was a housekeeper who came in, right? Not in the budget anymore.
Right.
Right? Like those are the items that we get to sit down and say, okay, you were paying somebody to come in and clean the house 2 or 3 times a month, and now it's $200 to $300 a month, and you're outside of your budget currently by $600. Where can we shave the $600?
Exactly.
Right? Food, we can't really shave. The rent, we can't shave. Utilities, we can't shave. But where can we help you shave, even for a short-term period?
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, I recently looked at a budget, and because you bring up food, it was just one of those comical things. And we all here in Seattle, we have a store called Metropolitan Market. That is a lovely store. We all love it. But you do not have to do your full family shopping at Metropolitan Market, and it will clearly triple your grocery bill. And
whether it's Met Market or Whole Foods, right? Yes.
Literally, this person was telling me that it was costing $3,000 for 3 people a month on their grocery bill. And I was like, no doubt we can shave some of that. I'm like, if we just could drive over to the QFC or the Safeway, I promise that bill will go down.
Were they going out to eat as well?
They were, absolutely. That going out to eat is a huge piece of many a budget.
Yes. So how do we help our clients balance that, right?
Right.
Even if it's for a short time. I think one of the areas that I work with a lot of the wives is the maintenance, whether it's the massages or the facials or the trips to the Medi Spa.
Right.
We have to have a really heart-to-heart to say, okay, for a season, can we take this out of the budget?
Right.
Because we don't have the money. It's either food or the Botox.
Right.
Right. But it's true. These are real conversations that we end up having.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
And when you're used to a certain lifestyle, it's hard to pick up the anchor and drop it somewhere else. Right?
Yeah, I love that analogy. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, as somebody who went through a divorce, and I was a stay-at-home parent for years and then had to go back. I mean, there's a lot of just adjustment to, oh, okay, now my entire day is going to look different. My week is going to, everything, your childcare, your kids' school, whether they're going to after school care, not after school care. And it takes, when you talk about doing these things for a season or for a short time, so much of the time, that's just what it takes, is that little bit of time to make those changes, get used to them, pivot, and move on your way in a more empowered, transformed way. And it's kind of amazing, when you can get to the other side and start coming into your own in a way that you might not have thought was possible before. And so I try to really help clients understand their potential and their ability to maximize what they're doing rather than stay focused looking back on what it used to be, because it can get better and better, and helping
or it could paralyze, right?
Yep.
Yes. So, pivot. I love that word. How do we help our clients pivot, even if it's just by a little degree, just a little bit enough that the viewpoint has changed? They were looking at, as I'm looking at the tree behind you, they were looking at a forest and they couldn't see a path. But if you look 5 feet away, there is a path.
Right.
Like, how do we help our clients? Just that slight little pivot, because that slight shift could change their entire life,
Entire life.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that word. One of the exercises that I do for myself personally, that helps me is I ask myself 5 questions every month. First is, where am I at? Just bullet point. And I got this off of a podcast. I'm a podcast junkie, so I can't tell you which podcast and who to give credit to at this time. But first question is, where am I at? Like, what's my mind frame? What's bothering me?
Hmm.
What's happening in my life? What happened, right? But then the next question is, what are my wins in the last 90 days?
Yeah.
So just shifting from I feel like I'm in a negative space to, wait a minute, what can I be thankful for? Because
Right.
these are some great things that I want to put on paper and say, this is a win.
Hmm.
And in that sense, the mind pivots. The next one is, where do I want to see myself in 90 days? Setting some small goals, short-term
Hmm.
goals. Next one being, where do I want to be in a year? And the last question being, where do I see myself in 3 to 5 years? Longer term goals. And so every month I just sit myself down and answer these 5 questions. Sometimes it's a very difficult month.
Right.
But when I think about, like mentally and emotionally, when I write it down, I might not be in the best frame of mind. But then once I start to write down my wins, some of the stress just subsides,
Oh, yeah.
right? When in the middle of going through difficult situations, it's hard to step outside and look in. But when you do
Absolutely.
step outside, just that shift happening is monumental. And once that shift happens, then you could look outside and say, okay, what new potentials do I have?
Right.
Short term that I can work towards. And then what's longer term? What's the midterm? And then what's the longer term? Especially for our clients going through divorce, they need the win for today.
Absolutely, they do.
They need a win in 90 days. They need a win in a year. They need something to look forward to in a year, something to look forward to 3 to 5 years. And if we in the work that we do can help our clients just take that first step,
It's
huge.
huge.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting. I mean, because when we as attorneys, get some of our clients, I mean, we're truly focused on a win in an hour. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what decision have they made to maybe make themselves safe? Maybe they've
Yeah.
decided to leave an abusive relationship, or, maybe they've decided, okay, I am filing for divorce, even though I've thought about it for 10 years. You know what I mean? Where they're making these really just huge decisions. And sometimes it's things, when I work with people, a lot of times in high conflict co-parenting, it's making a decision to not bite on some kind of, antagonistic, provocative email that maybe they
Yeah.
received from their spouse, and just being able to make enough decision to breathe, step back, and not respond. And I am like, that is a huge win,
Yeah.
to help them be able to help with the conflict and
Yeah.
de-escalating the conflict. And I find that your point to seeing those wins and being able to name them, write them down, is critical, because we all, I think, have such mean voices in our heads that
Yes.
tell us things. And it's like, wait a minute, you need to really celebrate your wins, because,
However small, right?
I mean, and they might seem small, to an outside person, but somebody who's in the midst of a very high conflict situation, I mean, it can be massive. It
Yes.
can be a total shift that they are no longer going to fire off those nasty grams when they get one. They're going to breathe and decide they're going to wait. That
Yes.
is life changing for the future conflict of that family.
Well, speaking of high conflict, we know that they know each other's triggers.
Oh, so
So
well.
just trigger, just volleying back and forth, right? So to pause that volleying
Yep,
and then shifting so that it volleys somewhere else,
totally.
huge.
It is. It's so funny you say it like that. I used to love to play tennis. I haven't played in
Mhm.
a while, but I used to say to people, like, let that ball drop. Just let it drop and go play somewhere else.
Yes.
Because if you can just stop that volleying, it there's nothing else. The ball's never going back to the other person, and they're
Yes.
just kind of stuck standing there looking at the
Yes.
ball on the other side of the net. And it is truly de-escalating to let that ball just drop and just walk away, go find another tennis partner. And
Please, like mind blown.
I mean,
That is, I mean, mind blowing concept because we're so used to engaging.
oh yeah,
Somebody picks on us, we pick right back, right? Versus, I'm not going to engage.
right.
I'm not going to put spark to the fire that could blow up in my face. I'm walking away. I see a bad scenario, going bye bye. And then what? No conflict. What's the other person going to do? Keep following you? No, after a while, they're going to know, hey, there's no steam to this.
Right.
Let them find another person who wants to engage. But for
I
us,
mean, yeah. I mean, no doubt, I don't mean to minimize. Clearly, there are some
exactly.
people
Yeah.
who will keep following.
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, there are
Yes.
those personality disordered
Yes.
clients that we all have dealt with. But I
Yes.
mean, for the most part, when we're dealing with people who have pretty sound mental health, it truly will
Yeah.
just end the conflict over time by just refusing to engage but
And
doing
in
it
the
in a
same
way.
manner,
Yeah,
right? Refusing
exactly.
to engage in the same manner that you have been engaging in for the decades you may have been married.
Exactly. And that's a hard shift. I
It's
mean,
a
no
hard
doubt.
shift. Yeah.
It's a very hard shift, but talk about a win when you're able to look back and see that change in your own mindset of, okay, I'm no longer going to engage.
Yeah.
And it makes, oh yeah, it's pretty life changing. I mean, I find the work we do to be fascinating, like in so many ways. I mean, but I think I love people and I'm fascinated by the dynamics of people. And so family law could not be more perfect for me.
Yes. I it's I know that you work with a lot of co-parenting. Um, and even that, just the shift in not engaging, right? And
Oh yeah.
now starting to reframe how parents can come together as co-parents, not as spouses, or coming together not as ex husband and wife or ex spouses, but just, hey, we are in it to make sure that we take care of our children. This is our main goal as co parents is how do we
Exactly.
ensure a safe, physically, mentally, emotionally, a space where our children could grow and thrive and not be traumatized by our issues.
Exactly. Well, and it so ties into the finances because people who are constantly in conflict, I mean, the amount of money they are burning through from their family to deal with their conflict. And when I'm representing the person who's, let's say, the breadwinner, I'm like, could you stop this? Like, you might as well be working part-time because you're spending half of your income on the conflict. And I'm like, no doubt that is not what you intend to be doing
Yeah.
with your working hours.
Yeah.
And I find, being able to talk to them about the cost of conflict, both in legal fees, in litigation costs, but also in the mental health costs that
Yeah.
their children are going to need and they are going to need. I mean, it is exceedingly expensive to have conflict when you can
Mind
avoid.
blowing. Yeah. I mean, again, going back to us being anchored in a certain way, lifting that anchor and dropping it somewhere else to say, hey, the cost, especially if they are the breadwinner, to say the cost. You are here to minimize your cost.
Right.
You hired me to help minimize the cost, but we need to have a conversation because you're exceeding the cost, the budget that you had set aside because we're too busy fighting.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think all of us professionals in the divorce world have to look at the cost of what our services and the process are to the family. And, just in dollars and cents, but then also the long-term emotional costs and
Yes.
the damage that gets done. I mean, it can be pretty intense for sure.
One thing I really appreciate about the collaborative process is that both attorneys recognize the goal is not, it's to stay out of litigation. The
Right,
goal is to come up with agreements that work for both parties. The goal is to stay amicable
right,
versus fighting. And it's huge. We get to keep, as best as we can, the emotions at a stable place so that agreements can be made. Because
right.
when the emotions, the stress is up here, you can't say yes. The only thing you think about is, no, leave me alone. I need
Exactly.
my space. But if we create something safe and something where people feel like their thoughts and emotions are honored, the yeses come.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
that's the thing I love about the collaborative process in the beginning. Really, I mean, I joke with my clients, some clients I'm like, okay, this is going to be pretty woo woo for you,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
not, I have to make sure they're prepared. But when we talk about high end goals and really put up those high end goals and let the couple see how oftentimes many of their goals are so aligned, even
Yes.
through their separation and potential divorce. And I'm not saying that, they don't need to move forward with their divorce, but they can still see though that they have alignment on many things. And I think that that's very helpful in starting the process, and also very helpful when we hit snags in the process to be able to come back to those high end goals and be like, well, let's look again at what were your high end goals, and let's see if the conversations we're having are helping us reach those, or
Yeah.
are they bringing us farther away from those goals?
I love that. That's spot on, right? Even in my mediation, we always go back to, what are your goals? These are
Right,
the goals that you had mentioned. Are we shifting from them?
right,
Do we need to reframe some of these? Okay. And if they're not, then how can we work towards these goals together?
right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it is such an important process to really help people talk about their goals. And I think you make such a good point when you mention asking them, like, are we shifting away from these goals? Because sometimes people's goals do change either through the process, or sometimes I find people have a hard time being really honest with what their goals are at the beginning. They don't necessarily have that psychological safety and feel like they can really say what their goals are.
Yes.
And I think sometimes through the process, they do become more psychologically safe, and they're able to say, this is really what I want. And that's not exactly what I said at the beginning. But I find that really providing them that arena to very often revisit those goals and make sure we truly are getting to what both parties' goals are. I mean, you can't get a better resolution than where both parties can say, yes, I am moving towards these goals that I set up at the beginning. No, we might not get there 100% for
Yeah.
both parties 100% of the time. But I mean, many, many times, I think through the end of the collaborative process, we do see movement in the right direction for both parties.
Yeah.
And the family is so much better off for that type of process.
I 100% agree. It's litigation is tough.
Oh, it's so
It's
toxic.
expensive and it's tough. And
Yep.
because it's expensive now, it's even tougher.
Right.
Right.
Well, and now you're waiting for months to get dates. I mean, with COVID in the court, I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Right.
So I'm like, oh no, we definitely want to figure out how to get this resolved outside of the court, if at all possible.
If at all possible. Right. And
Oh
hoping,
yeah.
I think helping society shift the way they look at divorce. Right now I'm doing a series on just the basics of divorce, on my blog and in my videos, and talking right now about the different types of divorce. The average person who thinks about divorce only knows litigation.
Right.
They don't know about the collaborative process. They don't know about the cooperative process. They don't even know that mediation is an option and that they don't have to ever step into a courtroom.
Right.
But in the state of Washington, you have to go through some sort of alternative dispute resolution, which could be mediation, arbitration, and a plethora of others. But 95% of cases are solved outside of that litigation model. But that's not what we see on television.
No,
That's
it's
not,
not.
right? We always think of the contentious divorce with the two attorneys, the hot shots, and
Right.
the judge saying this or that. It's not the, hey, how can we come to an agreement?
Yeah.
How do we amicably work this through so that we don't have to be enemies for life, especially if there's children?
Oh, yeah.
What can
Well,
we do?
even
Right?
with temporary orders, I feel like people forget that even just starting a divorce, you can go start a divorce in a mediator's office and work through just the most basic of your initial, like, what are we going to do for the next 30 days? Who's living in the house?
Yeah.
Who's paying the mortgage? Just getting those basic things done and working with a mediator to do that. I find your entire divorce can look different if you've started it off in a mediated kind of sense. And if the parties feel like the collaborative process might be too much, or they're not willing to sign a participation agreement saying they won't ever go to court, but being able to guide even people who think the court is the answer into a mediation process very, very early on, I think can change the course of how they look at their divorce.
Yeah.
And it's just, anything we can do, I think, to keep people out of court, the better. I think there's so few cases that actually need a court. And
I
again,
100% agree.
those are often really disturbed, some real mental health issues.
Yes.
Where we're just, making agreements doesn't really work.
Yes.
But well, I really cannot tell you how much I have appreciated your time today talking with us. And how can people reach you? Like, if people want to reach out to you, find out about your services, what's the best way for them to do that?
The website would be foundationsdivorcesolutions.com. Yeah.
We will be sure to get all of your contact information so that it gets into the comments of this, so that people can just readily and very easily get in touch with you. And I really appreciate your time this morning and your work with our clients, because it's really refreshing to me to talk to a financial person who has your level of compassion and care for the people you work with.
And Elise, right back at you. I just want to say thank you for who you are, and really using your gifts and your talents, not to cause contention, but really to help our clients come to agreements, because there is more than that courtroom. There's I love that you are a voice in our community to help shift the way people see divorce, that it doesn't have to be ugly. And thank you so much for the honor of being able to be here and share our joint message that there's a better way to do divorce.
There sure is. Well, and I'm just so glad that you and I have met. And I just think that what you do is amazing. And I can't wait to just continually refer work to you, because clients, as you said, so many of them, it's the money. And if we can get the money part worked out, so much falls into place.
I would love to do some collaborative cases with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day today.
Thank
and thanks
you
again for joining me.
I so appreciate you. Thank you, Elise.
Okay, bye.
Bye.